Aboard the SS Aurora, a luxury liner slicing through the Atlantic, a navigator lies dead, poisoned, his compass shattered. Was it the captain guarding his command, the crewman plotting a mutiny, or the wealthy widow hiding a scandal? Hercule Poirot, the master detective, unravels a web of blackmail, betrayal, and rebellion. In a race against time, with a storm closing in, only his little gray cells can steer the ship to justice. Chapter 1. The Sea's Whisper. The SS. Aurora sliced through the gray veil of the Atlantic, its prow parting the waves with a soft hiss, like a conspirator sharing a secret. The fog hung low, draping the ship in a shroud that muffled sound and blurred the edges of reality. Hercule Poirot, the diminutive Belgian detective with a mustache as precise as a draftsman's line, stood at the starboard rail. His gloved hands gripped the polished wood, and his gray eyes, sharp as cut glass, scanned the horizon. He had boarded at Southampton, lured by the promise of a quiet voyage to New York, a rare pause in a life spent unraveling the tangled threads of human deceit. Yet, as the sea whispered beneath the hull, Poirot felt the familiar prickle of instinct. Solitude, he knew, was no shield against mystery. The hour was early, the sky a bruised purple streaked with the first gold of dawn. Most passengers still slumbered in their cabins, lulled by the ship's gentle sway. Poirot, an early riser, savored the stillness, his mind as orderly as the neatly pressed lines of his pinstripe suit. He adjusted his Homburg hat, tilting it against the damp breeze, and inhaled the briny air. It was then that a cry, sharp, urgent, pierced the morning's calm. It came from the direction of the navigation room, a small chamber tucked near the bridge, where the ship's course was charted with mathematical precision. Poirot's steps were swift but measured as he followed the sound, his polished shoes clicking on the deck. A young steward, his face pale as the fog, emerged from the navigation room, stammering. "Monsieur, it's Mr. Hargreaves. He's dead." Poirot's mustache twitched, a subtle sign of the machinery of his mind springing to life. "Calm yourself, mon ami," he said, his voice smooth as velvet yet edged with authority. "Lead me to him." The navigation room was a study in ordered chaos. Charts sprawled across a heavy oak table, their edges curling like autumn leaves. Sextants and rulers gleamed in the dim light of a single lamp, swaying gently with the ship's motion. At the center of this tableau sat Mr. Edward Hargreaves, the ship's navigator, slumped forward as if in deep contemplation. His head rested on a chart of the North Atlantic, one hand clutching a pencil, the other limp at his side. His face, framed by thinning gray hair, was a mask of death. Eyes wide, lips parted, skin the color of old parchment. Beside him, a brass compass, its glass face shattered, lay like a broken talisman, its needle frozen in a meaningless direction. Poirot's gaze swept the scene, cataloging every detail with the precision of a watchmaker. The air carried a faint, bitter scent. Almonds, perhaps, though not quite. A glass of water, half full, stood perilously close to the table's edge, its surface undisturbed. A logbook lay open, its final entry incomplete, the ink smudged as if Hargreaves had faltered mid-sentence. The detective's eyes lingered on the compass. Why break it? A navigator's tool was his lifeline, as sacred as a priest's Bible. Its destruction was no accident. It was a statement. Captain Reginald Thorne burst into the room, his broad frame filling the doorway. His salt and pepper beard framed a face etched with strain, and his blue eyes, usually steady as the sea's horizon, flickered with unease. "What's this?" he demanded, his voice a low rumble. "Hargreaves, dead?" Dr. Phillips, the ship's physician, followed close behind, his thin frame and wire-rimmed spectacles giving him the air of a nervous scholar. He knelt beside the body, his fingers probing Hargreaves's wrist with practiced efficiency. "No pulse," he murmured, then leaned closer, sniffing the glass of water. "Poison. I'd stake my reputation on it. Cyanide, likely. Smell that. Bitter, like burnt almonds." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "And the time of death, doctor?" "Recent," Phillips replied, adjusting his spectacles. "No more than an hour, perhaps 2. Rigor hasn't set in." The captain's hands clenched into fists. "Who would do this? Hargreaves was the best navigator I've ever had. Kept us on course through storms that would have sunk lesser men." "Indeed," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. "Yet someone wished him silenced. The compass, Captain. Its destruction intrigues me. It is not merely broken, it is obliterated." "Why?" Thorn's jaw tightened, but he offered no answer. Poirot's eyes, bright with curiosity, darted to the steward, who hovered near the door. "You, monsieur, you found him. What did you see?" The steward, a lad no older than 20, swallowed hard. "I came to bring him tea, sir. He always took it at dawn. The door was ajar and there he was. I didn't touch nothing, I swear." Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "Very good. And you saw no one else?" "No, sir, just him. And that compass. It wasn't like that last night." Poirot dismissed the steward with a nod, his mind already turning. A poisoned navigator, a shattered compass, a ship adrift in fog. This was no random act. The Aurora carried secrets, and Hercule Poirot, with his little gray cells, would uncover them. He straightened, adjusting his cufflinks, and turned to the captain. "Monsieur Thorn, I suggest we keep this matter quiet for now. Panic is a poor companion at sea. With your permission, I shall investigate." Thorn hesitated, then gave a curt nod. "Do what you must, Mr. Poirot, but find the truth quickly. A ship without a navigator is a ship in peril." As Poirot left the room, the fog seemed to thicken, wrapping the Aurora in a cocoon of mystery. The sea whispered on, indifferent to the drama unfolding above its depths. Chapter 2. The Gathering Storm. The SS Aurora pressed onward through the Atlantic, its engines humming a steady hymn beneath the fog's oppressive weight. By midday, the ship's polished decks gleamed under a sun that had finally pierced the morning's gloom, but the air remained heavy, not with mist, but with suspicion. The news of Edward Hargreaves's death had not yet reached the passengers, thanks to Captain Thorn's iron grip on the crew's tongues, but whispers slithered through the corridors like errant breezes. Hercule Poirot, his compact frame immaculate in a charcoal suit, stood in the ship's grand saloon, observing the microcosm of humanity before him. His gray eyes, sharp as a falcon's, missed nothing: the clink of teacups, the forced laughter, the furtive glances. A ship, he mused, was a world unto itself, and like any world, it harbored its share of secrets. Captain Thorn had summoned Poirot to his private office shortly after the grim discovery in the navigation room. The office, a compact space lined with mahogany panels and nautical instruments, smelled of pipe tobacco and sea salt. Thorn sat behind a desk cluttered with logbooks, his broad shoulders hunched as if bearing the weight of the ship itself. His beard, flecked with gray, framed a face etched with lines that spoke of years at sea, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. A captain unmoored, Poirot thought. "Monsieur Poirot," Thorn began, his voice low and gravelly, I've seen storms and wrecks, but never a murder on my ship. Hargreaves was a good man, vital to us. I need this handled quietly. The passengers mustn't know. Not yet." Poirot inclined his head, his mustache twitching slightly. "Naturellement, Captain. Panic is a contagion best avoided, but to find the truth, I must ask questions, observe, and perhaps disturb the calm. You permit this?" Thorn's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Do what you must, but be discreet. I've a ship to run, and we're 3 days from New York." Poirot's lips curved into a faint, enigmatic smile. "Discretion is the hallmark of Hercule Poirot. Now, tell me of Hargreaves. Who might have wished him harm?" Thorn leaned back, his chair creaking. "Harm? He was liked well enough, kept to himself mostly, but he was sharp, could plot a course through a hurricane blindfolded. If anyone had a grudge, they hid it well." "And yet," Poirot said, his voice soft as silk, "he is dead, and his compass is shattered. Someone harbored ill will. Who had access to the navigation room?" Thorn frowned, rubbing his temple. "Myself, of course. The first mate, Mr. Cutler, runs errands there sometimes. The stewards bring meals, and, well, passengers wander, though they're not supposed to." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Passengers, you say? Interesting. I shall need a list of those who might have crossed Hargreaves' path. And the crew, any discord among them?" Thorn hesitated, his fingers drumming on the desk. "There's always grumbling on a ship, low wages, long hours, but nothing serious. Hargreaves mentioned something odd a few days ago, said he'd overheard talk among the crew, something about taking control. I thought he was imagining things." Poirot's eyebrows arched, a subtle signal of his interest. "Taking control? A strong phrase, Captain. And you did not investigate?" "I had no proof," Thorn said defensively. "Hargreaves was jumpy lately. I thought it was the strain of the voyage." Poirot made a mental note of the captain's words, his mind already weaving a tapestry of possibilities. A navigator, poisoned. A compass, destroyed. Talk of rebellion. The threads were there, but the pattern remained elusive. He rose, adjusting his cufflinks with precision. "Merci, Captain. I shall begin my inquiries. For now, keep the navigation room sealed." Thorn nodded, his expression a mix of relief and apprehension. Poirot stepped out, the ship's gentle sway a reminder of the vast, unpredictable sea beneath them. The Grand Saloon was the heart of the Aurora's social life, a cavernous room adorned with crystal chandeliers and velvet drapes the color of claret. Passengers gathered here for tea, their conversations a delicate dance of pleasantries and veiled barbs. Poirot entered, his presence unobtrusive yet commanding, like a shadow that drew the eye. He chose a corner table, ordered a tisane, and began his observations, his little gray cells humming with purpose. At a table near the center sat Captain Thorn, now in his formal uniform, his cap resting beside a cup of black coffee. He was speaking with a group of passengers, his laughter a touch too hearty, as if to dispel the tension Poirot knew he felt. Across the room, Mr. James Cutler, the first mate, stood near a window, polishing a brass fitting with a rag. His wiry frame seemed coiled, his dark eyes darting about as if expecting a storm. Poirot noted the man's hands, calloused, restless, with a faint tattoo peeking from beneath his sleeve. A snake, perhaps? The detective's memory flickered to the broken compass, its needle stilled. A symbol, he thought, but of what? Near the grand piano, Mrs. Eleanor Vance held court, her emerald silk gown catching the light like a tropical bird's plumage. A widow of considerable wealth, her late husband had been a shipping magnate, and her presence aboard was a topic of murmured speculation among the passengers. She sipped her tea with an air of regal detachment, but her eyes, sharp, calculating, betrayed a mind at work. Poirot watched as she deflected a question from a fellow passenger with a witty remark, her smile as precise as a blade. Poirot sipped his tisane, its warmth soothing his throat as he considered his suspects. Thorn, the captain, wielded absolute authority, yet his nervousness suggested a man guarding a secret, or fearing one. Cutler, the crew member, moved with the unease of a man who knew too much or feared discovery, and Mrs. Vance, the passenger, carried herself with the poise of one accustomed to power, yet her glances toward Thorn and Cutler hinted at connections unspoken. Each, Poirot knew, held a piece of the puzzle. He began with Thorn, approaching the captain's table with a courteous nod. "Pardon, Captain, a word?" Thorn excused himself from the passengers, his smile fading as he joined Poirot in a quieter corner. "What is it, Mr. Poirot?" "You spoke of Hargreaves's efficiency," Poirot said, his voice low. "But tell me, was he a man of routine? Did he, for example, always drink water at his desk?" Thorn frowned, considering. "Aye, he did. Kept a glass there, always. Said it helped him think clearly." "And who brought it to him?" Poirot's eyes were bright, unyielding. "The stewards, usually. Sometimes Cutler, if he was running an errand." "Why?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "A small detail, Captain. But in murder, no detail is too small." Leaving Thorn to ponder, Poirot approached Cutler, who was now wiping down a railing with unnecessary vigor. "Monsieur Cutler," Poirot said, his tone genial, "you are a man of many duties, non? You knew Monsieur Hargreaves well?" Cutler's hands paused, his eyes narrowing. "Knew him enough. He was the navigator. I'm just the mate. We didn't exactly share tea and biscuits." Poirot tilted his head, undeterred. "But you visited the navigation room, perhaps? Last night, even?" Cutler's jaw twitched, a muscle betraying his tension. "Might have dropped off some charts. What's it to you?" "Everything, monsieur," Poirot replied softly. "A man is dead, and I seek the truth. You saw nothing unusual?" "Nothing," Cutler said curtly, resuming his polishing. Poirot noted the man's evasiveness, the way his fingers tightened around the rag. There was fear there, or guilt, or both. Finally, Poirot approached Mrs. Vance, who was now alone, her tea cooling as she gazed out a porthole. "Madame," he said, bowing slightly, "forgive the intrusion. I am Hercule Poirot, and I am assisting the captain with a delicate matter." Her eyes, a cool shade of hazel, appraised him. "I've heard of you, Mr. Poirot. The detective, yes? What delicate matter brings you to me?" Poirot's smile was disarming. "The matter of Monsieur Hargreaves, the navigator. You knew him, perhaps?" Her lips pursed, a flicker of irritation crossing her face. "Hardly. I'm a passenger, not a sailor. I keep to my own affairs." "And yet," Poirot said, his voice gentle but probing, "you were seen near the navigation room last evening. A curious place for a passenger. To wander, non?" Mrs. Vance's fingers tightened around her teacup. "I was lost," she said coolly. "This ship is a maze, and I took a wrong turn after dinner. Is that a crime?" "Not at all," Poirot said, his eyes never leaving hers. "But a man is dead, madame, and I must ask, did you see Monsieur Hargreaves last night?" Her gaze held his, unflinching. "Number Y returned to my cabin. Whatever happened to him, I had no part in it." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Merci, madame. You have been most helpful. As he returned to his table, Poirot's mind churned. Thorne's unease, Cutler's defensiveness, Mrs. Vance's calculated poise, each suggested a hidden truth. The poison, Dr. Phillips had said, was cyanide, likely in the water glass. But who had placed it there? The stewards, Cutler, or someone else? And the compass, its destruction was deliberate, a gesture laden with meaning. Was it a warning, a defiance, or a distraction? Poirot's thoughts were interrupted by a young woman approaching his table, her face pale and her hands twisting a handkerchief. "Mr. Poirot?" she said hesitantly. "I'm Clara, one of the stewards. I heard you're looking into Mr. Hargreaves's death." Poirot gestured for her to sit. "Oui, mademoiselle. You have information?" She glanced around, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I brought him his water last night, around 9. He was fine then, working on his charts, but I saw someone near the navigation room later, close to midnight. I couldn't see who. It was dark, and I was in a hurry. But they were moving quickly, like they didn't want to be seen." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And you told no one?" "I was afraid," Clara admitted. "The crew's been tense lately. Talk of unfair wages, of trouble. Mr. Hargreaves, he knew something. He told me once to be careful who I trusted." Poirot leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. "Mademoiselle, this is most important. The figure you saw, man or woman, tall or short?" Clara shook her head. "I couldn't tell. It was just a shadow, gone in a moment." Poirot thanked her, his mind racing. A shadow at midnight, a poisoned glass, a broken compass. The pieces were scattered, but Hercule Poirot was a master at assembling puzzles. He rose, his tisane forgotten, and made his way to the navigation room, determined to examine it again before nightfall. The room was as he had left it, sealed by Thorne's orders. The charts, the glass, the shattered compass, all remained untouched. Poirot knelt beside the table, his gloved fingers tracing the compass's broken edge. The glass was splintered, the needle bent as if struck with force. He lifted it carefully, noting a faint scratch on the brass casing, barely visible. A tool, perhaps? Or a ring? He set it down, his gaze shifting to the charts. Hargreaves's final entry, smudged and incomplete, read, "Course correction needed. Danger." The word trailed off, the pencil mark jagged. Poirot straightened, his mind alight with possibilities. Hargreaves had sensed danger, perhaps from the crew, perhaps from a passenger. The broken compass was no mere vandalism. It was a message, a symbol of a course disrupted. But whose hand had wielded the poison? Whose shadow had Clara seen? As the saloon's chandeliers dimmed with the setting sun, Poirot felt the weight of the mystery settle upon him. The Aurora sailed on, its passengers blissfully unaware of the storm brewing within its walls. Hercule Poirot, however, was not unaware. He adjusted his tie, his little gray cells humming, and prepared to unravel the truth, one question at a time. Chapter 3. The Captain's Burden. The SS. Aurora plowed through the Atlantic's restless waves, its steel hull a steadfast bulwark against the sea's capricious moods. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky a tapestry of indigo and gold. But within the ship, a different kind of darkness gathered. Hercule Poirot, his compact figure a study in precision, navigated the narrow corridors toward Captain Reginald Thorne's cabin. The air was thick with the scent of polished wood and the faint tang of salt, a reminder of the vast, untamed ocean beyond. Poirot's mind, however, was fixed on the mystery at hand, the poisoned navigator, the shattered compass. and the whispers of unrest that seemed to ripple through the ship like an undercurrent. Thorn's cabin, situated just aft of the bridge, was a sanctuary of order amidst the chaos of a working vessel. The walls were adorned with nautical charts, their intricate lines tracing voyages across oceans and years. A brass sextant gleamed on a shelf beside a framed photograph of a younger Thorn, smiling beside a woman with kind eyes, his wife, perhaps, or a memory long left ashore. The captain sat at a small desk, his broad shoulders hunched over a logbook, his pen scratching fitfully. The lamplight cast shadows across his weathered face, deepening the lines of strain that Poirot had noted earlier. "Monsieur Poirot," Thorn said, looking up as the detective entered, his voice heavy with fatigue. "You've been poking about, I hear. Find anything?" Poirot closed the door softly behind him, his movements deliberate. "The truth, Captain, is like the sea. It reveals itself in layers. I have questions, and you, I think, have answers." He settled into a chair opposite Thorn, his gloved hands folded neatly, his gray eyes piercing. Thorn's brow furrowed, but he gestured for Poirot to continue. "Ask away. I've nothing to hide." Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint signal of skepticism. "We shall see, monsieur. Let us begin with Monsieur Hargreaves. You described him as loyal, efficient, but you also said he was distracted, oui? What troubled him?" Thorn leaned back, his chair creaking under his weight. He rubbed his beard, his eyes drifting to the photograph on the shelf. Hargreaves was a private man, kept his thoughts close, like a good sailor. But these last few weeks, he was different. Jumpy, you might say. Kept looking over his shoulder as if expecting trouble. Trouble? Poirot's voice was soft, inviting confidence. Of what kind? Thorn hesitated, his fingers drumming on the desk. He didn't say much, but he came to me 3 days ago, late at night. Said he'd overheard something among the crew, talk of discontent, of taking matters into their own hands. He wouldn't name names, just told me to watch my back. I thought he was exaggerating. The crew grumbles, always has. Low pay, long voyages, it's the sailor's lot. Poirot's eyes narrowed, his mind seizing on the phrase. Taking matters into their own hands. A grave suggestion, Captain. Did you not press him for details? I did, Thorn said, a touch of defensiveness in his tone. But Hargreaves clammed up, said he'd handle it, that he didn't want to stir trouble without proof. I trusted him to keep the ship on course, not to play detective. Poirot tilted his head, his expression unreadable. And yet, he is dead. Poisoned, with a broken compass at his side. This discontent you speak of, could it point to mutiny? Thorn's face darkened, his hands clenching into fists. Mutiny? That's a strong word, Mr. Poirot. My crew's loyal, or I'd know it. Hargreaves was mistaken, or someone wanted him to think there was trouble. Or someone wanted him silenced, Poirot countered, his voice smooth as polished steel. Tell me, Captain, who among your crew had reason to resent Hargreaves? Or you, perhaps? Thorn's eyes flashed, but he held Poirot's gaze. Resent me? I run a tight ship, but a fair one. Hargreaves was my right hand. Knew the stars better than most men know their own names. If anyone had a grudge, they didn't show it to me. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloging the captain's words, the slight tremor in his voice, the way his eyes flicked to the photograph when pressed. Thorn was a man of authority, yet beneath his gruff exterior lay a vulnerability, a fear, perhaps, of losing control. One final question, Captain, Poirot said, rising. The navigation room. Who had access to it last night between 9 and midnight? Thorne frowned, considering. Myself, though I was on the bridge most of the evening. Cutler, the first mate, runs messages there sometimes. The stewards bring food or water, and, well, passengers aren't supposed to go near it, but they wander. Mrs. Vance, for one, she's been seen poking about where she doesn't belong. Poirot's eyebrows arched, a spark of interest in his eyes. Mrs. Vance, you say? Most curious. Merci, Captain. You have been most illuminating. As Poirot left the cabin, the ship's bell tolled, its mournful clang echoing through the corridors. He paused, his gloved hand resting on the railing, and considered Thorne's words. The captain's mention of discontent echoed the steward Clara's warning of crew tension. Hargreaves had sensed a threat, perhaps from within the ranks, and had paid for it with his life. But the compass, its destruction, gnawed at Poirot's mind. It was not merely broken, it was defiled, its needle bent as if in anger. A navigator's tool, rendered useless, suggested a deeper intent, to disrupt the ship's course or to send a message. Poirot made his way to the deck, where the evening air was cool and sharp. The stars were beginning to emerge, faint pinpricks against the darkening sky. He stood at the rail, his thoughts as precise as the constellations Hargreaves had once charted. The captain's burden was clear, to maintain order on a ship teetering on the edge of chaos. But was Thorne a victim of circumstance or a player in a darker game? His reluctance to probe Hargreaves' warnings suggested either trust in his crew or a fear of what he might uncover. The detective's gaze shifted to the horizon, where sea and sky merged in a seamless void. The Aurora was a world apart, its inhabitants bound by the confines of steel and water. Somewhere among them was a killer, and Poirot's little gray cells were already at work, piecing together the fragments of motive and opportunity. The compass, the poison, the shadow at midnight, these were the clues that would lead him to the truth. He turned, his steps purposeful, and headed toward the crew's quarters. If Hargreaves had sensed unrest, the answers might lie with those who toiled below deck, where loyalties were forged or broken in the crucible of hardship. The sea whispered on, indifferent to the drama unfolding aboard. But Hercule Poirot was not indifferent. He adjusted his hat, his eyes gleaming with resolve, and descended into the heart of the ship. Chapter 4. The Crew Member's Shadow. The SS. Aurora thrummed with the pulse of its engines, a low, ceaseless drone that reverberated through the steel corridors below deck. Hercule Poirot descended the narrow staircase to the crew's quarters, his polished shoes an incongruous contrast to the scuffed, oil-slicked floors. The air here was thick with the scent of grease and sweat, a world apart from the polished elegance of the passenger decks. Dim electric bulbs flickered overhead, casting long shadows that danced like specters across the walls. Poirot's compact figure moved with purpose, his gray eyes alert, missing nothing. The murder of Edward Hargreaves, the shattered compass, the whispers of unrest, all pointed to a darkness festering in the ship's underbelly, and Poirot was determined to unearth it. The crew's quarters were a labyrinth of cramped cabins and cluttered workspaces, where men toiled in the heat of the engine room or the chill of the storage holds. Poirot sought out James Cutler, the first mate, whose sullen demeanor and evasive answers in the saloon had piqued the detective's curiosity. Cutler was a man of the shadows, Poirot thought, his wiry frame and restless hands suggesting a mind ill at ease. The tattoo on his wrist, a coiled snake, glimpsed briefly in the saloon, had lodged itself in Poirot's memory, a symbol that echoed the cryptic warning of mutiny hinted at by Captain Thorne. He found Cutler in the engine room, a cavernous space alive with the clatter of machinery and the hiss of steam. The air was heavy, the heat oppressive, and the roar of the engines made conversation a challenge. Cutler stood near a massive piston, his sleeves rolled up, his hands stained with grease as he adjusted a valve with a wrench. His dark hair was damp with sweat, and his eyes, when they met Poirot's, held a guarded intensity. "Monsieur Cutler," Poirot said, raising his voice to be heard over the din, "a moment of your time, s'il vous plaît." Cutler wiped his hands on a rag, his movements deliberate, almost defiant. "What do you want, Mr. Poirot? I've got work to do." Poirot's smile was disarming, his tone polite but unyielding. "Work, oui, but so have I. The work of justice. You knew Monsieur Hargreaves, the navigator. I wish to understand him better, and you, I think, can help." Cutler's jaw tightened, and he tossed the rag onto a nearby crate. "I told you in the saloon. I didn't know him well. He stayed in his room with his charts and his compass. I'm down here, keeping this ship running." "Yet you visited the navigation room," Poirot said, his eyes fixed on Cutler's. "You brought charts, perhaps, or water, last night between 9 and midnight?" Cutler's hands twitched, a fleeting sign of unease. "I might have dropped off some papers earlier in the evening, routine stuff, nothing more." Poirot tilted his head, his mustache twitching slightly. "Routine, you say? But a man is dead, monsieur, and routine becomes extraordinary in such circumstances. Tell me, what was Hargreaves like when you saw him?" Cutler shrugged, his eyes darting to the piston as if it held answers. "Same as always. Bent over his desk, scribbling. Didn't say much, never did." "And you noticed nothing unusual?" Poirot's voice was soft, like a velvet glove concealing a steel grip. "No visitors? No strange behavior?" "Nothing," Cutler said curtly, but his fingers betrayed him, curling tightly around the wrench. Poirot's gaze lingered on the tattoo, a snake, its coils sharp and deliberate, etched in black ink. It was no mere decoration, he sensed, but a mark of something deeper, perhaps a loyalty or a pact. "Very well," Poirot said, his tone light but his eyes unyielding. "One last question, Monsieur Cutler. The crew, there is talk of discontent, non? Low wages, long hours. Did Hargreaves ever speak of such things?" Cutler's face hardened, and for a moment Poirot thought he might refuse to answer. "The crew grumbles," he said finally. "Always do. Hargreaves wasn't one of us, though. He kept to himself, didn't mix with the lads. If he heard anything, he didn't share it with me." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Merci, monsieur. You have been most cooperative." He turned to leave, but paused, glancing back. "Your tattoo? It is striking. A snake, oui? A curious choice for a sailor." Cutler's hand instinctively covered his wrist, his eyes narrowing. "Just something from my younger days. Means nothing." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Everything means something, Monsieur Cutler." As he ascended to the upper decks, Poirot's mind churned with the encounter. Cutler's defensiveness, his reluctance to engage, suggested a man with something to hide. The snake tattoo, combined with Thorne's mention of crew unrest, painted a picture of potential rebellion. A mutiny, perhaps, as Hargreaves had feared. But why kill the navigator? Was Hargreaves a threat to Cutler's plans, or merely a convenient scapegoat? Back on the passenger deck, the air was cooler, the scent of salt mingling with the faint perfume of polished wood. Poirot paused at the rail, gazing out at the sea, its surface now a deep sapphire under the starlit sky. The Aurora was a floating world, its hierarchy as rigid as any society, yet fragile under the strain of ambition or betrayal. Cutler, with his shadowed eyes and coiled snake, was a piece of the puzzle, but not the whole picture. Poirot's thoughts returned to the navigation room, to the shattered compass and the smudged glass. The poison, cyanide, Dr. Phillips had said, was a calculated choice, swift and silent. Whoever had administered it had access to Hargreaves' water, and Cutler, as first mate, moved freely between decks, his duties granting him entry to places others could not go. But suspicion was not proof, and Poirot required proof as surely as a ship required a helm. He made his way to the ship's galley, a bustling space where stewards and cooks prepared meals for passengers and crew alike. The head cook, a burly man named Mr. Grayson, greeted Poirot with a nod, his apron stained with flour. "What brings you here, sir?" he asked, wiping his hands. "Not often we get gentlemen like you below deck." Poirot's smile was charming. "I am a man of simple tastes, Monsieur Grayson, but I have a taste for truth. The water served to Monsieur Hargreaves last night. Where did it come from?" Grayson scratched his head, his brow furrowing. "The water?" "From the jugs here, same as always. We fill 'em from the ship's tanks, keep 'em in the galley for the stewards to take round." "And who handled the jug for the navigation room?" Poirot asked, his voice gentle but probing. Grayson shrugged. "Could have been any of the stewards, or Mr. Cutler. He's in and out, fetching things for the officers. I saw him near the jugs yesterday, come to think of it. Asked for a glass himself, said he was parched." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Most interesting. And the stewards? Did they notice anything unusual about the water?" Grayson called over a young steward, a nervous lad named Thomas. "The water for Mr. Hargreaves?" Thomas said, his voice trembling slightly. "I filled his glass around 9, sir. Looked normal to me. He was working, didn't even look up when I left it." Poirot nodded, his mind cataloging the timeline. Clara, the stewardess, had seen a shadow near the navigation room at midnight. Cutler had been near the water jugs earlier. The poison could have been introduced at any point, but Cutler's access and evasiveness made him a focal point. Yet Poirot sensed the puzzle was not so simple. The broken compass suggested a motive beyond mere murder, a statement, a disruption. Was Cutler capable of such subtlety, or was he a pawn in a larger game? As Poirot left the galley, the ship's bell tolled, its mournful note a reminder of the passage of time. The Aurora sailed on, its course steady for now, but Poirot knew that beneath the surface, currents of deceit swirled. Cutler's shadow loomed large, but other shadows, those of Captain Thorne, Mrs. Vance, or an unknown figure, waited to be uncovered. Hercule Poirot adjusted his cufflinks, his little gray cells alight with purpose, and resolved to probe deeper into the heart of the mystery. Chapter 5. The Passenger's Secret. The SS. Aurora glided through the night, its decks bathed in the pale glow of moonlight that shimmered on the restless Atlantic. The air was crisp, carrying the tang of salt and the faint hum of the ship's engines, a steady pulse beneath the veneer of civility. Hercule Poirot, his compact form wrapped in a meticulously tailored overcoat, stood momentarily at the rail, his gray eyes reflecting the starlight as he contemplated the web of secrets entangling the ship, of the death of Edward Hargreaves, the shattered compass, the whispers of mutiny. All pointed to a conspiracy rooted in the human heart, and Poirot was determined to unravel it. His next inquiry led him to Mrs. Eleanor Vance, the enigmatic passenger whose presence aboard the Aurora seemed to stir the currents of suspicion. Mrs. Vance's cabin, located on the uppermost passenger deck, was a study in opulence. The door opened to reveal a spacious suite adorned with silk draperies in shades of emerald and gold, a mahogany writing desk, and a chaise longue draped with a cashmere throw. A sapphire necklace, glinting like a fragment of the sea itself, rested on a velvet cushion, catching the light of a crystal lamp. Mrs. Vance stood near a porthole, her silhouette framed against the dark expanse of ocean. Her emerald gown had been exchanged for a simpler, yet no less elegant, navy dress, and her hazel eyes met Poirot's with a cool, appraising gaze. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice smooth as polished marble, "to what do I owe this visit? I trust you are not here to admire my decor." Poirot bowed slightly, his mustache twitching with the faintest hint of amusement. "Madame, your decor is impeccable, but I am here in pursuit of truth. The matter of Monsieur Hargreaves' death requires my attention, and you, I believe, may shed light on certain mysteries." Mrs. Vance's lips curved into a smile, though it held no warmth. "Mysteries? I'm a passenger, not a sailor. My concerns are comfort and conversation, not the intrigues of the crew." Poirot's eyes gleamed, undeterred by her deflection. "And yet, madame, you were seen near the navigation room last evening, a place most unusual for a passenger of your station. May I ask what drew you there?" She turned from the porthole, her movements graceful but deliberate, and seated herself at the writing desk. "As I told you in the saloon, I was lost. This ship is a labyrinth, and after dinner I took a wrong turn. Surely you don't suspect me of some nefarious purpose?" Poirot's smile was disarming, but his gaze was sharp as a blade. "Suspect, madame? No, I merely observe. But let us speak plainly. Monsieur Hargreaves was poisoned, his compass destroyed. These are not accidents. You were near his room at a critical hour. Did you see him? Or perhaps someone else?" Mrs. Vance's fingers brushed the sapphire necklace, a gesture Poirot noted as one of distraction or concealment. "I saw no one," she said firmly. "I wandered briefly, realized my mistake, and returned to my cabin. If you must know, I was back here by 10:30, as my maid can confirm." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Your maid, oui. I shall speak with her. But tell me, madame, did you know Monsieur Hargreaves, even in passing?" Her eyes flickered, a momentary lapse in her composure. "I knew of him, as one knows of any officer on a ship. He was the navigator, was he not? I had no occasion to speak with him." Poirot tilted his head, his voice soft but insistent. "And yet, madame, a man does not die without reason. Hargreaves was troubled, perhaps by secrets he uncovered, secrets that might involve a passenger of means, no?" Mrs. Vance's smile tightened, her fingers stilling on the necklace. "You speak in riddles, Mr. Poirot. If you have accusations, make them plainly." "No accusations," Poirot said, raising a hand as if to soothe her. "Merely questions. The truth, madame, is like a chart. It must be plotted with care. If you recall anything, even the smallest detail, you will tell me. Oui?" She held his gaze, her expression a mask of calm. "If I recall anything, you will be the first to know." Poirot bowed again, his courtesy impeccable, and withdrew. As the door closed behind him, his mind was already at work, dissecting the encounter. Mrs. Vance's poise was formidable, but her fleeting unease, the way her fingers lingered on the necklace, The slight hesitation in her denial suggested she was not as detached as she claimed. Her presence near the navigation room, dismissed as a mere navigational error, felt too convenient. Was she hiding a connection to Hargreaves, or was her role in this drama yet to be revealed? He made his way to the passenger deck's lounge, where a steward directed him to Mrs. Vance's maid, a young woman named Lily. She was a slight figure with nervous hands and downcast eyes, polishing silverware in a small service room. Poirot approached with his characteristic charm, his voice gentle to put her at ease. "Mademoiselle Lily," he began, "I am Hercule Poirot, and I require your assistance. Your mistress, Mrs. Vance, says she returned to her cabin last night by 10:30. Can you confirm this?" Lily's hands paused, her eyes darting up briefly. "Yes, sir. She came back around then. I helped her with her gown and hair before she retired. She didn't go out again, not that I saw." Poirot nodded, his gaze noting the girl's unease. "And her mood, mademoiselle? Was she agitated?" Lily hesitated, her fingers twisting the polishing cloth. "She was quiet, sir, not herself. Kept looking at a letter she'd been writing, then tucked it away when she saw me." "A letter?" Poirot's eyebrows arched, his interest piqued. "You saw it?" "The contents, perhaps." "No, sir," Lily said quickly. "Just saw her writing it on her desk. She folded it up quick-like when I came in." Poirot's smile was encouraging. "You have been most helpful, mademoiselle. If you recall anything more, you will find me. Oui?" As he left the service room, Poirot's mind turned to the letter. A written secret, perhaps, or a communication that held the key to Mrs. Vance's nocturnal wanderings. He resolved to examine her cabin, but such an action required finesse and the captain's permission. For now, he returned to the navigation room, where the scene of Hargreaves' death awaited further scrutiny. The room was as he had left it, sealed under Thorne's orders. The charts, the smudged glass, the broken compass, all remained untouched, a silent tableau of murder. Poirot knelt beside the desk, his gloved fingers tracing the shards of the compass. The brass casing bore a faint scratch, as he had noted before, but now he saw something else, a tiny speck of blue caught in the jagged edge of the glass. Paint, perhaps? Or fabric? He extracted it carefully with a pocket knife, tucking it into a handkerchief for safekeeping. Rising, he examined the log book again. Hargreaves's final entry. Course correction needed. Danger was a cry from the grave, a warning cut short. Poirot's eyes lingered on the smudged ink, the jagged pencil mark. Had Hargreaves been interrupted by his killer, or had he faltered as the poison took hold? The glass of water, now in Dr. Phillips's care, bore a faint smudge on its rim. A fingerprint, perhaps, though the ship's limited resources made analysis uncertain. As Poirot left the navigation room, the ship's bell tolled, its somber note echoing through the corridors. The Aurora sailed on, its passengers and crew bound by the invisible threads of suspicion. Mrs. Vance, with her guarded eyes and hidden letter, was a puzzle within a puzzle. Was she a bystander caught in the wrong place, or a player in a game of deception? The speck of blue, the shadow at midnight, the snake on Cutler's wrist. These were the fragments Poirot would piece together. He adjusted his hat, his little gray cells humming with purpose, and set his sights on the next thread in the tapestry of truth. Chapter 6. The Poison's Trace. The SS Aurora sailed through a night as black as ink, the stars obscured by a veil of clouds that pressed low over the Atlantic. The ship's decks were quiet, save for the soft creak of wood and the distant thrum of engines, a heartbeat pulsing through the steel. Hercule Poirot, his overcoat buttoned against the evening chill, moved with his usual precision through the passenger corridors, his mind a whirl of deductions. The murder of Edward Hargreaves, the shattered compass, the whispers of mutiny, and the enigmatic Mrs. Vance. All were threads in a tapestry of deceit, and Poirot was determined to follow each to its source. His next inquiry led him to the ship's infirmary, where Dr. Phillips, the physician who had confirmed the presence of cyanide, awaited with the tools of his trade and, perhaps, answers to the poison's origin. The infirmary was a small, sterile room tucked near the ship's stern, its walls lined with cabinets of medical supplies and a single cot draped in crisp white linen. The air smelled of antiseptic, sharp and clinical, a stark contrast to the opulence of the passenger decks. Dr. Phillips, a wiry man with spectacles perched precariously on his nose, stood over a table cluttered with vials and instruments. The glass from Hargreaves' desk, carefully preserved, sat under a magnifying glass, its faint smudge glinting in the lamplight. Poirot's gray eyes, keen as ever, noted the doctor's furrowed brow and the nervous tap of his fingers. "Monsieur le Docteur," Poirot greeted, his voice smooth and courteous. "I trust you have made progress with our little problem?" Phillips looked up, adjusting his spectacles with a sigh. "Little problem, Mr. Poirot. A man's been poisoned, and I'm no closer to proving how. But yes, I've examined the glass. Cyanide, no question. Bitter odor, quick acting. It was in the water, and Hargreaves drank enough to kill him within minutes." Poirot nodded, his mustache twitching faintly. "Most precise, Doctor. But the source of this cyanide, where might it be found on a ship such as this?" Phillips gestured to a locked cabinet behind him. "Cyanide's not exactly standard issue, but we keep small amounts in the medical stores, for emergencies, you understand. It's used in certain treatments, though rarely. The cabinet's locked, always has been. Only I have the key." He patted his pocket, producing a small brass key as proof. Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest. "And this cabinet? It has been checked? No signs of tampering?" Phillips frowned, crossing to the cabinet and inspecting its lock. "None that I can see. It's secure, but—" He hesitated, his fingers lingering on the lock. "I did notice yesterday that one vial seemed out of place, not quite aligned with the others. I thought I'd just been careless, but now—" Poirot's eyebrows arched, his mind seizing on the detail. "A vial out of place, you say? Most curious. And who has access to this infirmary, Doctor?" Phillips rubbed his chin, considering. "Myself, primarily. The captain, of course, in emergencies. The stewards come in to clean or fetch supplies, but they're supervised. And Mr. Cutler, he's been here a few times, running errands for the officers. Said he needed bandages for a crewman last week." "Cutler, again," Poirot murmured, his voice soft but laden with significance. "He moves freely, does he not? From engine room to navigation room to infirmary. A man of many paths." Phillips's eyes widened slightly. "You think Cutler took the cyanide?" "I think nothing, monsieur," Poirot said, his tone mild but his gaze sharp. "I observe, I question, I deduce. Tell me, the glass from the navigation room. Have you examined the smudge?" Phillips nodded, lifting the glass carefully. "It's a fingerprint, I'm sure, but we've no equipment here to analyze it properly. The smudge is oily, though. Could be from someone handling machinery, or perhaps cosmetics." "Cosmetics?" Poirot's interest sharpened. A woman's touch, perhaps? Or a man who works with grease, like Monsieur Cutler? Phillips shrugged helplessly. Could be either. I'm a doctor, not a detective. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. And yet you have been most helpful. The glass, keep it safe, oui? It may yet speak to us. Leaving the infirmary, Poirot's mind churned with new connections. Cyanide from the medical stores, a vial out of place, a smudged fingerprint. These were clues that narrowed the field of suspicion. Cutler's access to the infirmary was damning, yet the possibility of cosmetics suggested another hand, perhaps Mrs. Vance's. Her wanderings near the navigation room, her guarded demeanor, and the mysterious letter mentioned by her maid, Lily, hinted at a secret she was keen to protect. But was it a secret worth killing for? Poirot decided to probe further into the ship's routines, seeking the steward who had filled Hargreaves's water glass. He found Thomas, the young steward from the galley, polishing brass fittings in the passenger lounge. The boy's nervous demeanor had not abated, and his eyes darted about as Poirot approached. "Monsieur Thomas," Poirot said, his voice gentle to soothe the lad's nerves. "You told me you filled Monsieur Hargreaves's glass at 9 last night. Tell me more." "The jug. Where was it kept?" Thomas swallowed, his hands twisting the polishing cloth. "In the galley, sir, with the others. We keep a few jugs there for the officers. I poured from one, same as always. Nothing looked wrong with it." "And who else was in the galley?" Poirot asked, his eyes fixed on the boy's face. "Monsieur Cutler, perhaps? Or a passenger?" Thomas hesitated, his brow furrowing. "Mr. Cutler was there earlier, sir, getting a glass for himself. Said he was thirsty after working in the engine room. I didn't see anyone else, but... Well, the galley's busy. People come and go." Poirot nodded, his mind cataloging the information. Cutler again near the water jugs. The pattern was emerging, but it was not yet complete. "And the jug itself, Monsieur Thomas, did you notice anything unusual? A smell, perhaps?" Thomas shook his head. "No, sir, just water. I'd have noticed if it smelled odd." Poirot thanked the boy and turned his attention to the passenger manifest, which Captain Thorne had provided earlier. Mrs. Vance's name stood out, her cabin number and status as a widow of a shipping magnate noted in precise script. Her wealth and influence made her an unlikely suspect for a crude crime, like poisoning, yet her presence near the navigation room and the hint of a letter suggested she was not merely a bystander. Poirot resolved to speak with her again, but first he needed to confirm the timeline of the fatal night. He sought out Clara, the stewardess who had seen a shadow near the navigation room at midnight. She was in the crew's mess, sipping tea with a weary expression. Her eyes widened as Poirot approached, and she set her cup down with a clatter. "Mademoiselle Clara," Poirot said, his tone soothing. "You spoke of a shadow near the navigation room at midnight. Can you recall anything more? The height, the gait, perhaps a sound?" Clara's hands trembled slightly. "I've been thinking on it, sir, but it's still fuzzy. It was dark, and I was rushing to finish my rounds. The figure was medium height, maybe? Moved quick, like they didn't want to be seen. I thought I heard a rustle, like fabric, but I can't be sure." "Fabric," Poirot repeated, his mind flashing to Mrs. Vance's silk gowns and Cutler's rough work clothes. "Most interesting. And you are certain this was near the navigation room?" "Yes, sir," Clara said, nodding vigorously. "Just down the corridor. I didn't think much of it then, but now, with Mr. Hargreaves dead." Poirot placed a reassuring hand on her arm, "You have done well, mademoiselle. Fear not, Hercule Poirot will find the truth." As he left the mess, the ship's bell tolled, its somber note a reminder of the urgency of his task. The poison's trace led to the infirmary, the galley, and the navigation room, with Cutler and Mrs. Vance circling the edges of the mystery. The speck of blue from the compass, the smudged fingerprint, the vial out of place. These were the fragments Poirot would assemble. He adjusted his tie, his little gray cells alight with purpose, and set his course for the next encounter, determined to uncover the hand that had wielded the cyanide. Chapter 7. The Compass's Message. The SS. Aurora pressed forward through the Atlantic, its hull slicing through waves that gleamed like polished obsidian under a moonless sky. The air was heavy with the promise of a storm, the horizon smudged with clouds that swallowed the stars. Hercule Poirot, his compact figure swathed in a dark overcoat, stood in the navigation room, where the silence of Edward Hargreaves's death lingered like a ghost. The room, sealed since the discovery of the body, was a frozen tableau of tragedy. Charts splayed across the oak table, the smudged glass preserved for evidence, and the shattered compass, its broken face a mute witness to the crime. Poirot's gray eyes, sharp as a hawk's, roamed the scene, seeking the message hidden in the wreckage. The compass, he sensed, was more than a casualty of violence. It was a symbol, a clue to the killer's intent. The lamp above swayed gently with the ship's motion, casting flickering shadows across the charts. Poirot knelt beside the table, his gloved fingers hovering over the compass's remains. The brass casing was dented, the glass splintered into a spiderweb of cracks, and the needle, once a guide to true north, was bent at an unnatural angle, as if struck with deliberate force. He recalled the speck of blue he had found embedded in the glass, a fragment of paint or fabric now tucked safely in his handkerchief. It was a whisper of evidence, but Poirot knew that even the smallest whisper could lead to truth. He turned his attention to the logbook, its final entry a haunting fragment. Course correction needed. Danger. The ink was smudged, the pencil mark jagged, as if Hargreaves had faltered in his final moments. Poirot's mind churned, piecing together the timeline. The steward Thomas had delivered water at 9, and Clara had seen a shadow near the navigation room at midnight. The poison, cyanide, swift and merciless, had been in the glass, likely introduced after Thomas's visit. But the compass's destruction puzzled him. Why break it? A navigator's tool was sacred, its loss a blow to the ship's very soul. Was it an act of rage, a distraction, or a deeper message? Poirot straightened, his gaze lingering on the charts. Hargreaves had been plotting a course, his calculations precise until the final interrupted scrawl. The detective's fingers traced the lines, noting a faint pencil mark in the margin, a series of numbers, seemingly random. 47-12-09. Coordinates, perhaps? Or a code? Poirot committed them to memory, his little gray cells humming with possibility. As he examined the table, a faint glint caught his eye. A scrap of paper, wedged beneath a corner of the logbook, nearly invisible in the dim light. He extracted it carefully, unfolding it to reveal a hurried scrawl in Hargreaves's hand. "Beware the snake." The words sent a chill through Poirot, echoing the coiled tattoo on James Cutler's wrist. Was this Hargreaves's final warning, a clue to the danger he had sensed? The snake, a symbol of treachery, suggested a betrayal within the crew. Perhaps the mutiny Captain Thorne had dismissed as mere grumbling. Poirot tucked the note into his pocket, his mind racing. The compass's message was clear. Someone had sought to disrupt the ship's course, metaphorically or literally. Hargreaves, with his knowledge of the crew's unrest, had been a threat, his death a means to silence him. But the broken compass added a layer of complexity. Was it a symbol of defiance against the ship's authority, or a warning to others who might follow Hargreaves's path? He left the navigation room, locking the door behind him, and made his way to the bridge, where Captain Thorne stood watch. The bridge was a nerve center of activity, its instruments gleaming under the harsh electric lights. Thorne, his broad frame silhouetted against a starless sky, turned as Poirot entered, his face etched with fatigue. "Monsieur Poirot," Thorne said, his voice rough with the strain of command. "Any progress? The crew's restless, and we're a day behind schedule without Hargreaves." Poirot's expression was grave. "Progress, oui, but the truth is a puzzle with many pieces. Tell me, Captain, these numbers, 47-12-90, do they mean anything to you? A course, perhaps?" Thorne frowned, rubbing his beard. "Sounds like coordinates, but I'd need to check the charts. Hargreaves was always scribbling such things." "Why?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A detail, Captain, but one that may guide us. And this phrase, 'Beware the snake.' Does it stir any thoughts?" Thorne's face darkened, his hands clenching the rail. "A snake? Sounds like Hargreaves's paranoia. He was always muttering about the crew, their complaints. I told him to let it go, that I'd handle it." "And did you?" Poirot's voice was soft, but its edge was unmistakable. Thorne's eyes flashed with irritation. "I run a tight ship, Mr. Poirot. If there's trouble, I'll root it out, but I've seen no snakes, only loyal men." Poirot nodded, his skepticism veiled by courtesy. "Loyalty, Captain, is a fragile thing at sea. I shall continue my inquiries. The compass, I believe, holds the key." Leaving the bridge, Poirot descended to the passenger deck, his thoughts turning to Mrs. Vance. The speck of blue from the compass nagged at him. Could it be a trace of her sapphire necklace, or perhaps paint from Cutler's work in the engine room? Her presence near the navigation room, her guarded demeanor, and the letter mentioned by her maid suggested a secret she was keen to protect. But was it connected to the crew's unrest, or was she a separate thread in the tapestry? He paused at the Grand Saloon, where a few late-night passengers lingered over brandy and conversation. Mrs. Vance was absent, likely retired to her cabin, but Poirot's gaze fell on a young deckhand hovering near the service door. The lad, no older than 18, had the wary look of one carrying a burden. Poirot approached, his manner genial. "Monsieur," he said, "you are part of the crew, oui? A moment, if you please. I am Hercule Poirot, and I seek to understand the late Monsieur Hargreaves." The deckhand, whose name tag read William, shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't know him well, sir. Just saw him in the navigation room sometimes, working late." "And the crew?" Poirot pressed gently. "They speak of him. Of troubles, perhaps?" William's eyes darted away, his voice low. "There's talk, sir. Some of the lads. They're not happy. Wages are low, and the captain's strict. Mr. Hargreaves, he heard things, said we should watch ourselves. I heard him talking to Mr. Cutler once. Sounded heated." Poirot's interest sharpened. "Heated, you say? About what?" William hesitated, then whispered, "Something about keeping the course straight. Mr. Hargreaves said he wouldn't let it happen, whatever it was. Mr. Cutler told him to mind his own business." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his mind's rapid calculations. "Most enlightening, Monsieur William. You have done well to share this." As the deckhand slipped away, Poirot stood alone, the saloon's chatter fading into the background. The note? "Beware the snake." And William's account pointed to Cutler as a central figure in the crew's discontent. Hargreaves had sensed a plot, perhaps a mutiny, and had confronted Cutler, sealing his fate. The compass's destruction was a message, a rejection of Hargreaves's authority, a signal to the crew that the course could be altered. But was Cutler the mastermind, or was he acting under another's influence? The ship's bell tolled, its mournful clang echoing through the night. Poirot adjusted his hat, his little gray cells alight with purpose. The compass had spoken, its message one of betrayal and defiance. The truth was close, but it lay hidden in the shadows of motive and opportunity. With renewed resolve, Poirot set his course for Mrs. Vance's cabin, determined to uncover the secret that might tie her to the crime, or absolve her. Chapter 8. The Letter Revealed. The SS. Aurora pressed onward through the Atlantic's inky depths, its decks hushed under a sky heavy with unseen clouds. The air was thick with the promise of a gathering storm, its distant rumble a faint echo of the tension simmering within the ship's steel walls. Hercule Poirot, his compact figure cloaked in the precision of his tailored overcoat, moved through the passenger corridors with the quiet determination of a man closing in on truth. The murder of Edward Hargreaves, the shattered compass, the whispers of mutiny, and the cryptic note, "Beware the snake," had woven a tapestry of suspicion, and Poirot's little gray cells were alight with the task of unraveling it. His inquiries had pointed to James Cutler's shadowed motives and Mrs. Eleanor Vance's guarded demeanor, but a new clue, the letter mentioned by her maid, Lily, beckoned him toward her cabin, where secrets might lie hidden. Mrs. Vance's suite, a haven of elegance amidst the ship's utilitarian sprawl, was lit by the soft glow of a crystal lamp, its light dancing on the silk draperies and polished mahogany. Poirot had secured Captain Thorne's reluctant permission to search the cabin, provided he did so discreetly, while Mrs. Vance dined in the grand saloon. The captain's approval had come with a warning. "Tread lightly, Mr. Poirot. Mrs. Vance is a woman of influence, and I'll not have her offended without cause." Poirot had nodded, his mustache twitching with the faintest hint of amusement. Cause, he thought, was precisely what he sought. The cabin door clicked shut behind him, and Poirot's eyes swept the room with methodical precision. The sapphire necklace still rested on its velvet cushion, its facets catching the lamplight like a captive sea. The writing desk, where Lily had seen Mrs. Vance penning a letter, was his first target. Its surface was orderly, adorned with a silver inkstand and a few sheets of monogrammed stationery bearing the initials E.V. Poirot's gloved fingers moved deftly, lifting papers and inspecting drawers. In the top drawer, beneath a silk scarf embroidered with peacock feathers, he found it, a single sheet of paper, folded tightly, its edges creased as if handled with urgency. He unfolded it with care, his gray eyes narrowing as he read the hurried script. "Mrs. Vance, I know your secret. Meet me at midnight, or I tell the captain. E.H." The initials confirmed what Poirot had suspected. Edward Hargreaves had written this note, and it was no mere correspondence. It was blackmail. The implications were profound. Mrs. Vance, with her wealth and poise, was entangled in Hargreaves' final hours. Her presence near the navigation room no longer a coincidence. But what secret could a navigator have uncovered about a passenger of her stature? Poirot tucked the letter into his pocket, his mind racing. The note suggested Hargreaves had leverage over Mrs. Vance, something damning enough to warrant a midnight meeting. Had she gone to confront him, only to find him dead? Or had she ensured his silence with cyanide? The speck of blue from the compass, possibly a fragment of her sapphire necklace, nagged at Poirot's thoughts, a potential link to the crime scene. Yet her cool denial of any connection to Hargreaves, coupled with her maid's confirmation of her return by 10:30, complicated the picture. He continued his search, his fingers probing the desk's crevices. Beneath a stack of letters, innocuous correspondence with friends. In New York, he found a small photograph, tucked away as if to escape notice. It showed a younger Mrs. Vance, radiant in a white gown, standing beside a man in a naval uniform. The man's face was stern, his eyes shadowed, and a faint resemblance to Captain Thorne stirred Poirot's curiosity. Was this her late husband, the shipping magnate, or another figure from her past, tied to the Aurora's present drama? The sound of footsteps in the corridor snapped Poirot back to the present. He replaced the photograph and scarf, ensuring the desk appeared untouched, and slipped out of the cabin just as a steward passed by, oblivious to his presence. The ship's bell tolled, its somber note a reminder of time's relentless march. Poirot's thoughts turned to the timeline. Hargreaves' note demanded a meeting at midnight, yet Clara had seen a shadow near the navigation room at that hour, and Mrs. Vance claimed to have been in her cabin by 10:30. The discrepancy suggested either a lie or another player in the night's events. He made his way to the grand saloon, where the clink of crystal and murmur of conversation masked the undercurrent of unease. Mrs. Vance sat at a corner table, her navy dress a stark contrast to the glittering gowns around her. She sipped a glass of wine, her expression serene. But Poirot noted the slight tension in her posture, the way her fingers gripped the stem. He approached, his manner courteous but resolute. "Madame Vance," he said, bowing slightly. "A moment, if you please. We must speak again of last night." Her hazel eyes met his, cool and unyielding. "Mr. Poirot, I've told you all I know. I was lost. I returned to my cabin. Must we revisit this tiresome subject?" Poirot's smile was disarming, but his gaze was piercing. "Tiresome, madame? A man is dead, and truth is never tiresome to Hercule Poirot. I have found something that suggests you were not entirely candid. A note, perhaps, from Monsieur Hargreaves." Her face paled, a fleeting crack in her composure, but she recovered swiftly. "A note? I received no such thing. You overstep, Mr. Poirot." He leaned closer, his voice soft but unyielding. "Madame, I do not accuse, I inquire. Hargreaves wrote to you, demanding a meeting at midnight. He claimed to know your secret. What was it, madame, that he held over you?" Mrs. Vance's lips tightened, her fingers clenching the wine glass. "This is absurd. If such a note exists, it's a fabrication. Hargreaves was nothing to me, a navigator, a stranger. I have no secrets worth killing for." Poirot's eyes gleamed, noting her defensiveness. "And yet, madame, you were seen near his room. A shadow at midnight, a broken compass, a poisoned glass. These are not coincidences. If you are innocent, help me understand. What secret did Hargreaves believe he knew?" She rose, her movements graceful but tense. "You pry too far, Mr. Poirot. I am a private woman, and I owe you no explanations. Good evening." As she swept from the saloon, Poirot watched her go, his mind cataloging her reaction. Her denial was vehement, but fear flickered in her eyes. A fear not of guilt, perhaps, but of exposure. The note confirmed Hargreaves's attempt at blackmail, but the nature of her secret remained elusive. Was it tied to her late husband's shipping empire, or something more personal? The photograph, with its naval figure, suggested a connection to the sea, perhaps to Thorne himself. Poirot's thoughts turned to Cutler, whose snake tattoo and proximity to the water jugs made him a prime suspect. The note's warning, "Beware the snake," pointed to him, yet Mrs. Vance's involvement complicated the puzzle. Had Hargreaves uncovered two threats, a mutiny led by Cutler and a secret held by Mrs. Vance? Or were they intertwined, a conspiracy binding passenger and crew? He resolved to confront Cutler again, but first he sought out Lily, Mrs. Vance's maid, to verify the timeline. He found her in the service room, folding linens with trembling hands. "Mademoiselle Lily," he said gently, "a small matter. The letter your mistress wrote, did you see her send it, or receive another?" Lily's eyes widened, her voice barely a whisper. "No, sir. She wrote it, then hid it when I came in. But I saw a note on her desk earlier that day, not in her writing. She burned it in the ashtray after reading it." Poirot's mustache twitched, his interest piqued. "Burned it, you say? Most intriguing. And her mood after this?" "She was upset, sir," Lily admitted. "Kept pacing, muttering about nosy fools. I didn't dare ask." Poirot thanked her, his mind racing. The burned note, likely Hargreaves' blackmail attempt, confirmed Mrs. Vance's receipt of his demand. Her decision to burn it suggested a desire to erase evidence, but of what? Her presence near the navigation room, the speck of blue, the photograph, all pointed to a deeper connection to the Aurora's secrets. As the ship's bell tolled, its mournful clang reverberated through the night. Poirot adjusted his cufflinks, his little gray cells alight with purpose. The letter had revealed a motive, but the puzzle was far from complete. Mrs. Vance, Cutler, and perhaps Thorne himself held pieces of the truth, and Poirot would pursue them relentlessly, guided by the silent compass of his intuition. Chapter 9. The Confrontation. The SS Aurora sailed through a restless sea, the waves curling against its hull like fingers probing for weakness. The night was deep, the sky a velvet shroud pierced by the occasional flicker of starlight, as if the heavens themselves were withholding secrets. Hercule Poirot, his compact frame a silhouette of resolve, moved through the grand saloon of the ship, where the clink of crystal and the murmur of late-night conversation masked the undercurrent of dread that had settled since Edward Hargreaves's death. The discovery of the blackmail. Note: "Mrs. Vance, I know your secret. Meet me at midnight, or I tell the captain." E.H. had cast a new light on the mystery, implicating the enigmatic passenger in the navigator's final hours. Poirot's little gray cells were alight with purpose, and he sought Mrs. Eleanor Vance for a confrontation that would, he hoped, unravel the truth she so carefully guarded. The saloon was a glittering stage, its chandeliers casting prisms of light across velvet drapes and polished tables. Mrs. Vance sat alone at a corner table, her navy dress a stark contrast to the vibrant gowns of other passengers. A glass of red wine rested before her, untouched, its surface as still as her expression. Yet Poirot, with his keen eye for human nature, noted the subtle signs of tension, the faint crease between her brows, the way her fingers traced the rim of the glass without lifting it. She was a woman poised on the edge of a precipice, and Poirot intended to nudge her toward revelation. "Madame Vance," he said, approaching with a courteous bow, his voice smooth as silk but edged with steel. "Forgive the intrusion, but we must speak. The matter of Monsieur Hargreaves's death grows urgent, and you, I believe, hold a key to the truth." Her hazel eyes met his, cool and unyielding, though a flicker of wariness betrayed her composure. "Mr. Poirot, you are persistent. I've told you all I know. I was lost near the navigation room. I returned to my cabin. What more do you want?" Poirot seated himself opposite her, uninvited but undeterred, his gloved hands folded neatly on the table. "What I want, madame, is the truth, and I have found something that suggests you have not been entirely forthcoming." He paused, his gaze locking with hers, then produced the folded note from his pocket, holding it just out of reach. "A letter written by Monsieur Hargreaves. It demands a meeting at midnight, claiming knowledge of your secret. Shall I read it aloud, or do you prefer to explain?" Mrs. Vance's face paled, her fingers tightening around the wine-glass until her knuckles whitened. For a moment, silence hung between them, heavy as the storm clouds outside. Then she leaned back, her lips curving into a smile that held no warmth. "You are clever, Mr. Poirot, but you misjudge me. If such a note exists, it is nonsense. Hargreaves was delusional, grasping at shadows. I have no secrets worth his threats." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his skepticism. "Delusional, madam. A man who charts courses across oceans is not prone to flights of fancy." He wrote, "I know your secret." "And you burned a note, did you not, after reading it? Your maid, Lily, saw you. Why destroy it if it was nonsense?" Her eyes flashed, a spark of anger breaking through her poise. "You've been spying on me, Mr. Poirot. That is unbecoming, even for a detective. Yes, I received a note, and yes, I burned it. It was absurd, accusing me of smuggling goods aboard. This ship. Hargreaves was mad, or desperate for money. I went to the navigation room to tell him to leave me alone, but he was alive when I left." Poirot's eyebrows arched, his mind seizing on her admission. "You went to meet him, then, at midnight? Yet you told me you were in your cabin by 10:30. Mrs. Vance's lips pursed, a momentary lapse in her control. "I misspoke. I did go to see him, briefly, around 11. I told him his accusations were baseless, and I left. He was alive, Mr. Poirot, I swear it." "Alive, you say?" Poirot murmured, his voice soft but relentless. "And yet a shadow was seen near the navigation room at midnight, and Hargreaves was dead by dawn, poisoned by cyanide in his water. A curious coincidence. None, that you were there so close to the fatal hour?" Her face hardened, her voice rising slightly. "I didn't kill him. I had no reason to. His threats were empty. There was no smuggling, no secret. He was a fool, meddling in matters beyond his station." Poirot leaned forward, his eyes piercing. "And what matters, madame? Might those be? Your late husband was a shipping magnate, oui? A man with connections to ships like this one, perhaps to Captain Thorne himself. The photograph in your cabin, a naval officer. Was it your husband, or another who ties you to this ship?" Mrs. Vance's breath caught, her composure cracking like thin ice. "You've been in my cabin. You overstep, Mr. Poirot. That photograph is private, and it has nothing to do with Hargreaves or his death." "Everything, madame, is connected in a murder," Poirot said, his tone unyielding. Hargreaves believed he knew something worth blackmailing you for. If not smuggling, then what? A scandal, perhaps? A connection to the crew's unrest? She rose, her movements sharp, her voice cold. I will not be interrogated like a common criminal. If you have evidence, present it to the captain. Otherwise, leave me be. Poirot remained seated, his gaze steady. Evidence, madame, is what I seek, and I will find it, with or without your cooperation. But consider this. Silence protects no one, least of all the innocent. Mrs. Vance swept from the saloon, her navy dress rustling like a storm's warning. Poirot watched her go, his mind cataloging her words and reactions. Her admission to visiting Hargreaves at 11 was a critical shift, placing her closer to the time of death. Yet her denial of the smuggling accusation rang true, her indignation too raw to be entirely feigned. The photograph, the burned note, the speck of blue from the compass, these were pieces of a puzzle that refused to align. Was Mrs. Vance a victim of Hargreaves's overreach, or had she silenced him to protect a deeper truth? He rose, his thoughts turning to James Cutler, whose snake tattoo and proximity to the water jugs made him a persistent shadow in the investigation. The note found in the navigation room. Beware the snake, pointed to Cutler, yet Mrs. Vance's involvement suggested a broader conspiracy. Had Hargreaves stumbled upon a plot that linked passenger and crew, or were their secrets separate threads knotted by chance? Poirot made his way to the deck, where the night air was sharp with salt and the promise of rain. The ship's bell tolled, its mournful clang a reminder of the urgency of his task. He paused at the rail, gazing into the dark expanse of sea, his mind a whirl of deductions. Mrs. Vance's secret, whatever it was, had driven Hargreaves to blackmail, and perhaps to his death. The compass, shattered and bent, was a message of defiance. But to whom? Cutler, with his talk of crew discontent, remained a prime suspect. Yet Mrs. Vance's presence at the scene could not be ignored. As the first drops of rain pattered against the deck, Poirot adjusted his hat, his little gray cells humming with purpose. The confrontation had yielded truths, but also new questions. The Aurora sailed on, its course steady, but its heart troubled, and Hercule Poirot would not rest until the silent compass revealed its final secret. Chapter 10. The Crew's Whisper. The SS. Aurora plowed through the Atlantic, its hull groaning faintly as it met the swell of waves stirred by an approaching storm. The night was a heavy curtain, the sky obscured by clouds that churned with the promise of rain, and the air carried a chill that seeped into the bones. Hercule Poirot, his overcoat buttoned tightly against the damp, descended the narrow staircase to the crew's quarters, where the air was thick with the mingled scents of oil, sweat, and discontent. The murder of Edward Hargreaves, the shattered compass, the blackmail note to Mrs. Vance, and the ominous warning, "Beware the snake," had woven a complex web, and Poirot sensed that the heart of the mystery lay not in the polished salons above, but in the shadowed world below deck, where whispers of rebellion simmered. The crew's quarters were a stark contrast to the opulence of the passenger decks. The corridors were cramped, lit by flickering bulbs that cast a sickly yellow glow over scuffed walls and rusted fittings. The hum of the engines was a constant presence, a low thrum that seemed to pulse with the ship's unease. Poirot's polished shoes clicked softly on the metal floor, an incongruous sound amidst the clatter of tools and the murmur of voices. He sought the truth in the crew's whispers, for Hargreaves had feared a mutiny, and James Cutler, with his snake tattoo and evasive demeanor, was at the center of that fear. Poirot found the crew's mess, a small room where off-duty sailors gathered over tin mugs of tea and stale biscuits. The air was heavy with the smell of tobacco and damp wool, and the men's faces, weathered by sea and toil, turned toward him with wary curiosity. At a corner table sat William, the young deckhand who had spoken of Hargreaves's heated exchange with Cutler. His eyes widened as Poirot approached, and he set his mug down with a clatter. "Monsieur William," Poirot said, his voice gentle but commanding. "A moment, if you please. You spoke of Monsieur Hargreaves and Monsieur Cutler, of words exchanged about keeping the course straight. I must know more. The truth? It is vital." William glanced nervously at his companions, who had fallen silent, their eyes fixed on the detective. I don't know much, sir," he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. "It was a week ago, in the engine room. I was cleaning and I heard them arguing. Mr. Hargreaves was angry, said something about not letting it happen. Mr. Cutler told him to stay out of it, said he'd regret sticking his nose where it didn't belong." Poirot's gray eyes gleamed, his mustache twitching faintly. "Most interesting, monsieur. And this it, what was it? A plan, perhaps? A mutiny?" The word hung in the air, and a ripple of tension passed through the room. The other crewmen exchanged glances, their hands tightening around mugs or cards. William swallowed hard, his voice dropping lower. "I don't know, sir, but there's been talk. Quiet like. Some of the lads are fed up, say the captain's cheating us on wages, working us too hard. Mr. Cutler, he's been stirring things up, saying we deserve better." Poirot's mind seized on the revelation, the pieces of the puzzle shifting into place. "Stirring things up, you say? And Monsieur Hargreaves, he knew of this?" William nodded, his eyes darting to the door. "He must have. He was always in his room. But he heard things. Said he'd tell the captain if the talk didn't stop. I think he was trying to protect the ship." Poirot's expression remained impassive, but his thoughts raced. Hargreaves, the loyal navigator, had uncovered a plot, perhaps led by Cutler, to challenge Captain Thorne's authority. The note, "Beware the snake," was a warning, and the broken compass a symbol of defiance against the ship's course, both literal and figurative. But had Cutler acted alone, or was there another hand guiding the rebellion? "Merci, Monsieur William," Poirot said, his tone reassuring. "You have been most courageous. One final question. Did you see Monsieur Cutler near the navigation room on the night of Hargreaves's death?" William hesitated, his fingers twisting a frayed thread on his sleeve. I can't be sure, sir. It was late, and I was on deck, but I saw him earlier, around 10, heading toward the officers' quarters. He looked angry." Poirot nodded, his mind cataloging the detail. Cutler, angry, near the navigation room's corridor, close to the time of the poisoning. The cyanide, likely taken from the infirmary, and the water jug, accessible in the galley, pointed to Cutler's opportunity. Yet Mrs. Vance's presence at 11, her blackmail note, and the speck of blue from the compass suggested a broader conspiracy. Was she complicit, or merely a distraction? Leaving the mess, Poirot paused in the corridor, the engine's hum a reminder of the ship's relentless progress. The crew's whispers confirmed Hargreaves's fears of mutiny, with Cutler as the likely instigator. The snake tattoo, the note, and William's account painted a picture of a man plotting rebellion, silenced by Hargreaves's threat to expose him. But the poison's precision and the compass's deliberate destruction suggested a mind more calculating than Cutler's rough demeanor implied. Poirot ascended to the passenger deck, seeking Captain Thorne to share his findings, but his thoughts were interrupted by a faint sound, a muffled argument from a nearby storage room. He approached, his steps silent, and pressed his ear to the door. The voices were low, urgent, one unmistakably Cutler's, the other unfamiliar but sharp with authority. "You've gone too far," the unfamiliar voice hissed. "This wasn't the plan. You were supposed to keep him quiet, not kill him." Cutler's reply was gruff, defensive. "He was going to ruin everything. I did what I had to. You wanted control, didn't you?" Poirot's heart quickened, his little gray cells alight with the implications. Cutler had a confederate, someone with a stake in the mutiny, someone who had expected subtlety but received murder. Was it Thorne, seeking to quash dissent without bloodshed, or another figure hidden in the ship's hierarchy? The voices faded, footsteps retreating, and Poirot slipped away before he could be discovered. He made his way to the bridge, where Thorne stood alone, his broad frame silhouetted against the dark sea. The captain's face was haggard, his eyes reflecting the weight of command. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, turning, "you look like a man with news. What have you found?" Poirot's voice was measured, his eyes probing. "News, oui, Captain. The crew speaks of discontent, led by Monsieur Cutler. Hargreaves knew of it, threatened to expose a plot, perhaps a mutiny. And I have heard whispers tonight of a plan gone awry. A voice, angry with Cutler for killing Hargreaves." Thorne's face darkened, his hands clenching the rail. "A mutiny? And Cutler? I'd have staked my life on his loyalty, despite his grumbling. Who was the other voice?" Poirot shook his head, his expression grave. "That I do not yet know. But the compass, Captain. It was broken to send a message, to defy Hargreaves' authority. The snake, it seems, is real, and it coils among your crew." Thorne rubbed his beard, his eyes distant. "If there's a plot, I'll crush it. But murder, that's a different beast. Find the truth, Mr. Poirot, before this ship tears itself apart." Poirot nodded, his mind already charting the next course. The crew's whispers had confirmed Cutler's role, but the unknown voice suggested a deeper conspiracy, one that might entangle Mrs. Vance or even Thorne himself. The blackmail note, the speck of blue, the shattered compass, these were the threads he would weave into clarity. As the ship's bell tolled, its mournful clang echoing through the night, Poirot adjusted his hat, his resolve unshaken. The Aurora sailed on, but its heart was troubled, and Hercule Poirot would not rest until the truth was laid bare. Chapter 11. The Final Piece. The SS. Aurora surged through the Atlantic, its steel frame trembling under the strain of a gathering storm. The sky was a tumult of charcoal clouds, their edges lit by flashes of lightning that illuminated the churning sea below. The air was charged with electricity, a mirror to the tension that crackled within the ship's confines. Hercule Poirot, his compact form a beacon of calm amidst the brewing chaos, stood in the grand saloon, where the chandeliers swayed gently with the ship's motion. The murder of Edward Hargreaves, the shattered compass, the blackmail note to Mrs. Vance, and the crew's whispers of mutiny had woven a complex tapestry of deceit, and Poirot sensed the moment had come to assemble the final pieces. With the captain's permission, he had summoned the key players, Captain Reginald Thorne, James Cutler, and Mrs. Eleanor Vance, to the captain's cabin for a reckoning. The cabin was a fortress of order, its mahogany walls and nautical charts a testament to Thorn's command. The storm's distant rumble seeped through the portholes, a counterpoint to the heavy silence that greeted Poirot's arrival. Thorn stood behind his desk, his broad shoulders rigid, his salt and pepper beard framing a face etched with strain. Cutler leaned against a wall, his wiry frame coiled with defiance, his snake tattoo partially visible beneath a rolled-up sleeve. Mrs. Vance sat in a chair, her navy dress impeccable, her hazel eyes cool but wary. The air was thick with unspoken accusations, and Poirot, with his meticulous suit and gleaming eyes, was the conductor of this fraught orchestra. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice smooth as velvet but carrying the weight of authority. "We are gathered to resolve a tragedy, the murder of Monsieur Edward Hargreaves, the navigator of this ship. He was poisoned with cyanide, his compass shattered, his final warning scrawled in desperation. Beware the snake. The truth, it is close, and it will be revealed tonight." Thorn's jaw tightened, his hands clenching the edge of the desk. "Get on with it, Mr. Poirot. If there's a killer among us, name them." Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint sign of his focus. "Patience, Captain. The truth is a puzzle, and each piece must be placed with care. Let us begin with the facts. Hargreaves was poisoned between 11 and midnight, his water laced with cyanide from the infirmary's stores. A fingerprint smudges the glass, oily, perhaps from machinery or cosmetics. The compass, broken with force, bears a speck of blue, and a note warns of a snake. These are our clues." He turned to Mrs. Vance, his gaze piercing. "Madame, you received a note from Hargreaves demanding a midnight meeting about a secret. You admitted to visiting him at 11, claiming he was alive when you left. Yet a shadow was seen at midnight, and you burned a note, did you not?" Mrs. Vance's lips pursed, her fingers brushing her sapphire necklace. "I told you, Mr. Poirot, his accusations were baseless. He claimed I was smuggling goods. Absurd. I confronted him, left him alive, and burned his note to avoid scandal. I am no murderer." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Perhaps, madame. But your presence near the navigation room, and this—" he held up the handkerchief containing the speck of blue, "suggests a connection. Is this blue from your necklace or another source?" Her eyes widened, but she recovered quickly. "My necklace? Preposterous. I touched nothing in that room." Poirot turned to Cutler, whose dark eyes smoldered with defiance. "Monsieur Cutler, you are the snake, no? Your tattoo, the note's warning, the crew's whispers of mutiny, all point to you. Hargreaves threatened to expose your plan, and you were seen near the water jugs, with access to the infirmary's cyanide." Cutler's fists clenched, his voice rough. "You've got no proof, Poirot. I'm no killer. Hargreaves was sticking his nose where it didn't belong, but I didn't touch him." Poirot's eyes gleamed, undeterred. "No proof? The glass, monsieur, will show your fingerprint, I think. You handled the water jug, laced it with cyanide, and broke the compass to send a message, to defy Hargreaves's authority and rally the crew. The voice I heard, arguing with you in the storage room, confirms it. You acted to protect your mutiny, but it was not the plan." Cutler lunged forward, his face twisted with rage. "You're grasping at shadows. I didn't—" Thorn stepped between them, his voice a growl. "Enough, Cutler. If you're guilty, you'll face justice." Mrs. Vance gasped, her hand at her throat, and Poirot raised a hand for silence. One moment, Captain. There is another piece. The photograph in Madame Vance's cabin. A naval officer, perhaps linked to you, Captain. Was it her late husband, or a connection to this ship? And the voice with Cutler. Who was it? Thorne's face paled, his eyes darting to Mrs. Vance. Her husband was a friend, years ago, but that's nothing to do with this. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Everything is connected, Captain. The final piece is this. Hargreaves uncovered two threats, a mutiny led by Cutler, and a secret he believed Madame Vance held. But the voice with Cutler suggests another hand, perhaps guiding the mutiny. I propose it was not you, Captain, nor Madame Vance, but a crewman, silenced by fear. He turned to Cutler, his voice relentless. You poisoned Hargreaves, monsieur, because he threatened your rebellion. The compass was your message to the crew. No more guidance, no more loyalty. The blue speck? Paint from the engine room where you work. The fingerprint will confirm it. Cutler's defiance crumbled, his shoulders slumping. I didn't mean for it to go this far. He was going to tell Thorne, ruin everything. The crew deserved better wages, better treatment. I took the cyanide, slipped it in his water. The compass. It was a warning to the others. Mrs. Vance exhaled, her relief palpable, while Thorne's face hardened with betrayal. You fool, Cutler, he growled. You've damned us all. Poirot's gaze softened, but his resolve remained. The truth, it is painful, but necessary. Madame Vance, your secret, perhaps a scandal from your husband's past, drove Hargreaves to blackmail, but you are innocent of murder. Captain, your ship is yours again, though vigilance is needed. Thorne seized Cutler's arm, his voice grim. You'll be confined until we reach port. Move. As Cutler was led away, Poirot stood alone, the storm's rumble echoing outside. The final piece had fallen into place, the silent compass's message revealed. A mutiny thwarted, a murder solved. The Aurora sailed on, its course steady, but its heart forever marked by the truth Hercule Poirot had uncovered. Chapter 12. The Sea's Justice. The SS. Aurora pressed forward through the Atlantic, its hull cutting through waves that churned with the fury of an approaching storm. The sky was a tumult of roiling clouds, their edges lit by jagged streaks of lightning that cast fleeting shadows across the deck. The air was heavy with the scent of rain and salt, a primal reminder of the sea's dominion. Hercule Poirot stood alone at the starboard rail, his compact figure resolute against the wind that tugged at his overcoat. The murder of Edward Hargreaves had been solved. James Cutler, driven by the fervor of a planned mutiny, had poisoned the navigator and shattered his compass, a defiant act to rally the crew. Yet the resolution, while clear, left ripples of unease, like the wake trailing behind the ship. Poirot's little gray cells, ever vigilant, pondered the aftermath, the secrets still half hidden, and the justice that the sea itself seemed to demand. The captain's cabin, where the confrontation had unfolded, was now a distant memory, as Cutler was confined to the brig, his confession a weight lifted from the Aurora's heart. Captain Reginald Thorne had taken charge with grim efficiency, ordering Cutler's isolation and ensuring the crew's unrest was quelled with promises of review once they reached New York. Mrs. Eleanor Vance, absolved of murder, but shadowed by her own secrets, had retreated to her cabin, her sapphire necklace and guarded demeanor a lingering enigma. Poirot, however, felt the case was not entirely closed. Not until the final threads were tied, the last questions answered. He descended to the brig. A yew, Stark, iron-walled cell below deck where Cutler sat on a narrow cot, his wiry frame slumped, his snake tattoo stark against his pale wrist. The flickering light of a single bulb cast harsh shadows, amplifying the man's defeat. Poirot stood outside the bars, his gray eyes piercing, his voice calm but unyielding. "Monsieur Cutler," he began, "you have confessed to the murder of Edward Hargreaves, to poisoning his water and breaking his compass. But there is more, non? The voice I heard in the storage room, arguing with you, who was it? Your mutiny had a confederate, perhaps one who wished Hargreaves silenced but not dead." Cutler's head lifted, his eyes smoldering with resentment. "You've got me, Poirot. Isn't that enough? I acted alone. The crew's fed up, and I saw a chance to change things. Hargreaves was in the way, threatening to snitch to Thorne. I took the cyanide from the infirmary, slipped it in his jug. The compass. It was a message to show the lads we could steer our own course." Poirot's mustache twitched, his skepticism subtle but evident. "Alone, you say? Yet I heard another voice, angry, accusing you of going too far. A man of authority, perhaps, or one with much to lose. Speak, monsieur, or the truth will find you in New York, where justice is less forgiving." Cutler's jaw tightened, his hands clenching the cot's edge. "There's no one else. I did it. The crew's talk was just talk, grumbling, not a real plan. I got carried away, that's all." Poirot's gaze held steady, searching Cutler's face for the lie he suspected. The voice in the storage room had been sharp, commanding, not the tone of a fellow conspirator, but of someone higher in the ship's hierarchy, or perhaps outside it. Was it possible Mrs. Vance, with her wealth and connections, had influenced the crew's unrest indirectly? Or was there another figure, still hidden, pulling strings from the shadows? Leaving the brig, Poirot sought out Captain Thorne, who stood on the bridge, his broad frame silhouetted against the storm's flickering light. The captain's face was haggard, his eyes reflecting the weight of betrayal. "Mr. Poirot," he said, his voice rough, "you've done your work. Cutler's locked away, and the crew's under control. We'll make port in 2 days, and the authorities will handle him." Poirot nodded, his expression grave. "Oui, Captain, but the sea's justice is not always the law's. Cutler confessed, but he protects someone. A voice I heard, arguing with him. You, perhaps? Or another who wished Hargreaves silenced?" Thorne's face darkened, his hands gripping the rail. "Me? I'd sooner sink this ship than betray it. Hargreaves was my best man. If there's another traitor, I'll find them." Poirot's eyes gleamed, noting the captain's vehemence. "And Madame Vance, Captain, her secret, what is it? The photograph in her cabin, a naval officer. Your friend, you said. Is there more?" Thorne hesitated, his gaze distant. "Her husband, Charles Vance, was a colleague years ago. He made enemies in the shipping trade, deals that went sour. Hargreaves must have heard rumors, thought he could squeeze her for money. She's no killer, Poirot, just a woman guarding her past." Poirot's mind catalogued the information, the pieces falling into place. Mrs. Vance's secret was likely tied to her husband's dealings, a scandal Hargreaves had stumbled upon, perhaps through old shipping logs or crew gossip. It explained the blackmail note, but not her presence near the navigation room, unless she had sought to confront him, as she claimed. The speck of blue, the smudged fingerprint, Cutler's confession, all pointed to him as the killer, yet the unknown voice nagged at Poirot's instincts. He returned to the deck. where the storm was breaking, rain lashing the planks and wind howling through the rigging. Standing at the rail, Poirot gazed into the tempest, his thoughts as turbulent as the sea. The Aurora was a microcosm of human ambition and betrayal, its course steady, but its soul scarred. Cutler's mutiny had been thwarted, his crime exposed, but the shadow of another conspirator lingered. Was it a crewman, silenced by fear, or a passenger with hidden influence? The photograph, the note, the compass, all were silent now, their messages delivered. As lightning illuminated the horizon, Poirot adjusted his hat, his little gray cells at peace. "The sea," he murmured. "It keeps its secrets, but not from Hercule Poirot." The Aurora sailed on, its justice served, and Poirot turned from the rail, ready to face the calm that followed the storm.